In this lecture, I will discuss imagery processing. Today, nearly all image interpretation and analysis involves some digital processing. This includes image formatting, correcting, and enhancement to better understand the data, or even automatic classification. We did not go over this last week because this is not a remote sensing class, so I don't want to go into detail about image processing, but I will go over some of the highlights so you better understand how the data you are working with came to be. For our intents and purposes, most of the image processing functions can be categorized into the following 4 categories: preprocessing, image enhancement, image transformation, and image classification and analysis. Preprocessing, also called restoration and rectification, involves using operations to correct for radiometric and geometric errors and distortions, which is normally required before the data is analyzed. Radiometric corrections remove sensor irregularities and any sensor or atmospheric noise so that the data accurately measures and represents the reflected or emitted radiation. Geometric corrections get rid of any geometric distortions caused by variations with the sensor to earth geometry. And that is when the data is given a coordinate and reference system. Excuse me. Images are given accurate coordinates through a process called geometric registration. This process connects the image coordinates with different cells to known ground control points. For example, let's say you had an image of UTK's campus and a list of all the GPS coordinates of the northwest corner of buildings across campus. You would identify each building in the image that you had the coordinates for, and then connect the cells located at the northwest corner of the building with its corresponding coordinate pairs. There are multiple ways to do this, but however you go about it, you still want multiple points spread across the entire area of the image in order to get the most accurate results. You wouldn't just want one cluster surrounding the Starbucks and the Student Center. You could also match the new image locations with locations in another image that has already been georeferenced with geographic coordinates. Once the coordinates are connected to the image, it is resampled to determine the coordinate values of all the other cells. Image enhancement is really anything that makes it easier or better to visually interpret an image. It's only used to improve the appearance of the imagery for better visual interpretation and analysis through contrast stretching and filtering based on the image's histogram. Contrast stretching increases the variation in tone between the features, making them appear more distinct, while spatial filtering enhances or suppresses specific spatial patterns in an image. In raw imagery, the useful data is usually only a small portion of the possible range of digital values, which is normally 8 bits or 256 levels. Contrast enhancement changes the original values so that more of the visible available range is used, which increases the contrast between the targeted data that you want and their backgrounds. There are many different techniques used to increase the contrast and detail in the image, but I'm only going to go over a few. The simplest type of enhancement is called linear contrast stretch. This is done by determining the lower and upper bounds from the histogram, usually the min and max brightness values, and then transforming it so that the values stretch to fill the range. And that way you have the entire color range available, which allows you to see more variation. A linear stretch uniformly expands this range to cover the full range of values from 0 to 255. So, for example, in this top histogram, we'll say this value here is 25 and this value here is 50. Normally, whenever you're looking at the image, it would still include all of these values from 0 to 255, even though you don't have any values before 25 and after 50. So basically, all of those colors are being wasted. So instead of that, what this is doing, the linear contrast is doing, is changing this. So now this is 25 and this is 50. And so the color ranges vary from here instead of just from here. However, if the input range is not uniformly distributed, a histogram equalized stretch may be better. This stretch assigns more display values to the more frequently occurring portions of the histogram. That allows for more detail to be shown in those areas compared to portions of the histogram with fewer occurrences. So if we were to look at this second image, we would have more values, say from 0 to 20, and I don't know, 150 to 160, and then 200 to 255. So we would basically take these areas where there are no color values being shown and then make them available in these areas, this little area, and this area here. It's also possible to enhance a portion of the histogram that's more relevant to your data. For example, say you want to see the difference in the amount of sediment in a river, and those values occur from 50 to 75. You could stretch only that small portion of the histogram, which is represented by the water, to the full grayscale, 0 to 255. All the pixels that aren't within that range would be excluded, so there would be much more visual variation within the data. So that is basically taking this area here and then only giving visible values to these and then removing all of this imagery, because all you really care about is this portion right here. But then the colors will stretch out so you get from 0 to light blue. Now, keep in mind that whenever you do any of this image enhancement, that you aren't actually changing any of the values, you're only changing the color based on the smaller window ranges. Moving on to filtering. Spatial filters change the texture of the image by highlighting or suppressing specific features in an image based on their spatial frequency. I will talk more about image texture in the next video, but areas that are rough in texture are areas with a lot of variation in tone in a small area, and smooth areas have little variation. A common way to filter an image is by using a moving window. A window is a block of pixels, like 3x3 or 5x5, that frame a single pixel. The window stays the same size, but the blocks change as it moves across the image. When it moves across an image, it applies a mathematical formula to each pixel based on its window, and it individually applies to every pixel in the image. Using different formulas and weight values can be used to better enhance the image. Low-pass filters, like mean and median moving windows, are used to emphasize larger, homogeneous areas of similar tone and reduce the smaller detail in the image, creating a smoothing effect. Image enhancement can actually make an image look worse instead of better, but enhancement techniques are chosen based on a special purpose, which may make the image not as appealing to the untrained or unknowing eye, but actually makes it easier to interpret for analysis. Image transformations are like enhancements, but they usually combine and process multiple bands of data at once. It uses arithmetic operations like subtraction, addition, multiplication, and division to combine and transform the original bands into quote-unquote new images to better display or highlight certain features in the scene. Image classification operations are used to digitally identify and classify pixels in the data. Classification assigns each pixel in an image to a particular class or theme based on its pixel or cell value. I'm not going to go further into image transformation or classification because I'm going to talk about it in another video this week.